Exposed, CEO husband takes stand after his wife's humiliating interview, transforming everything. Charlie Thompson sat on the edge of their bed, disbelief coursing through him like electricity. The TV in the corner droned on with the clip of Sarah's interview, her voice clipped and defensive beneath the scathing critique of the panel. Unqualified, lacking integrity. Their words echoed around the room, piercing through the calm walls of their home and dominating his thoughts. He could barely breathe, his heart racing as he fought to grasp the gravity of the situation. How could anyone question the talent and tenacity of the woman he married? She was a force, and yet, here she was, destroyed in public, all while he stood impotent, wallowing in his own silence. His own heart began to twist painfully. The pride he felt over his thriving tech startup felt like a distant echo, muted by the weight of her humiliation. Doubt gnawed at him. Could he really push forward in his career while she fought to reclaim her dignity? It was a sickening juxtaposition. Their lives had always been intertwined, their successes intertwined as they chased the American dream together. But now, with the industry's glaring scrutiny on Sarah, that dream felt slipping, frayed at the edges. Charlie clenched his fists, the muscles in his forearms tightening with frustration. He wrestled with anger not just towards the panel, but towards the double standards that plagued their industry. A man would never face such vitriol for a bad performance. That thought fueled his rage. In the realm of tech, he had navigated the biases, but with Sarah, his professional realm collided with a different world, a world that demanded respect for his wife but mocked her at every turn. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Hand trembling, Charlie shut off the television and buried his head in his hands. His mind raced with uncertainty. Did he prioritize his company's growth and turn a blind eye to the injustice swirling around them? Or did he step into the spotlight, defying the very industry that had been so good to him? The thought of pitting his career against a fight for Sarah's integrity sent chills coursing through him. He had always believed in doing what was right, but was it worth risking everything they had built together? An intrusive thought crept into his mind, a desperate need to protect Sarah from further embarrassment. Muffled sobs rang from the other room, a wretched sound that cut through Charlie's internal turmoil. How could he protect her? Could he stand on a public platform while she suffered in silence? The thought made him nauseous, and then, amidst the chaos, he noticed a forgotten journal lying beneath the bed. He reluctantly reached for it, flipping through the pages filled with youthful dreams and echoes of a mentor's voice echoing words of integrity and hard work. He had come so far since then, but that guiding light was flickering, and he struggled to reignite it. Would he find his way back to that conviction just in time to make a stand beside Sarah? The tension swelled within him, a brewing storm that threatened to fracture everything he held dear. As he stared at the notebook, he felt the weight of a decision pressing down on him, the road ahead cloaked in uncertainty and peril. What would he ultimately choose? The safety of silence or the power of a voice that could either unite or divide? A decision was looming, and with it, the power to reshape not just their lives but the very fabric of a world that seemed so cruel and unforgiving. Charlie flung the journal onto the bed, frustration boiling within him. He felt a sense of urgency pulse through his veins. Sarah needed him. He needed clarity, a path illuminated by purpose. Challenging conventional wisdom had never intimidated him. Yet, the prospect of entering the fray now felt perilous, blurring the lines between professional loyalty and personal commitment. As he paced the room, images of Sarah's expression during the interview replayed in his mind, a mixture of defiance and despair. Each thought pressed against him, amplifying his conviction. This was a critical moment not just for her, but for them as a couple. The tension of their shared ambition rested on his shoulders. If he remained passive, he risked losing not only her respect but their partnership. Charlie considered his next steps as he scraped through the frayed edges of his conscience. In his world of tech startups, raw innovation and competition often reigned supreme. He had burned bridges before, confronted rivals head-on. The stakes of this battle felt uncomfortably different. He was tasked with defending the woman he loved, recognizing the deep-seated double standards that permeated the industry. The sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating piles of paperwork on his desk. Sifting through project proposals, contracts, and budget forecasts, Charlie envisioned how he had tackled challenges in his business. He needed to channel this determination towards Sarah's fight. It was not merely a display of solidarity but an intrinsic acknowledgement of her worth. He sat down at his desk, heart racing faster than his fingers could move. Maybe he could leverage his platform as CEO, perhaps even schedule a town hall at his company where he could address equality in the workplace. But would that alienate partners? Change the trajectory of his business? Could he afford to take this risk? Pushing these concerns aside, Charlie began typing. Clarity surged as he wrote. He crafted a message sharp, poignant, calling out the inequities he saw not only in Sarah's experience but in the broader tech landscape. This wasn't just about loyalty, it was about authenticity and leadership. The moment felt electric, each keystroke filled with purpose. As the sun began to set outside, inscribed in amber, he hesitated. What would the reaction be? Would his allies take a stand alongside him, or would they shy away from the controversy? A pit formed in his stomach, the fear of isolation clawing at his mind. However, he couldn't keep quiet any longer. The urgency pulsed through him. Sarah was suffering, and he would stand by her, regardless of the repercussions. Taking a deep breath, Charlie hit send. A wave of relief flooded over him. Whatever the consequences, silence was no longer an option. He resolved to speak out, but the journey had just begun. He understood that the questions now loomed larger than before. How would the industry respond? And more importantly, how would Sarah react? Charlie glanced once more at her journal, half opened on the bed, a reminder of their shared dreams. The surge of resolve coursing through him settled into something steadier: commitment. The following day would bring fresh challenges, and he needed a plan. The mounting tension awaited him, not merely as an echo of past grievances but as a catalyst for change. The time had come for confrontation. But the shadows of doubt whispered on the edges of his resolve. Had he truly understood the depth of the struggle ahead? Suddenly, it wasn't just about his voice, it became about their future together, and that uncertainty loomed like a storm on the horizon. The next morning, Charlie awoke with a knot in his stomach. The sunlight poured into the room, yet it felt heavy, as if the weight of his decision from the previous night clung to him. He had taken a stand, but the immediate aftermath began to press down on him like an impending storm. He couldn't shake the image of Sarah's face, her disappointment mingled with hope. This was about her, but it was also about him proving that he was more than a businessman. He was a partner ready to fight for what was right. At breakfast, he eyed Sarah as she poured coffee. She caught his gaze and offered a slight, tentative smile. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated. "Not really," he admitted, the truth hanging between them like a fragile thread. "I sent out that message last night." Her brows furrowed as she tried to remain expressionless. "You mean the one about the interview?" "Yes." I couldn't stay silent anymore. It felt like what? She pressed, setting down her cup. A moment of heroism? "Sarah, you know what I mean." He rubbed the back of his neck, feeling the pressure rise. "I had to speak up for you. We can't just stand by when the world is like this." She sighed, turning from him, her back tense. "And what if it backfires? What if it costs you everything?" He bristled at her doubt but understood her fear was rooted in reality. "We can't keep living in a world that overlooks inequality. You shouldn't have to fight this on your own. I never asked you to fight for me, Charlie. I wanted you to believe in me as a professional. My merit alone should matter," she shot back, eyes ablaze with a mixture of frustration and sorrow. Charlie's heart sank. A deeper part of him recognized the tremor in her voice. She wasn't just questioning his actions, she was questioning their partnership. In his eagerness to defend, he had possibly underestimated her own ability to navigate these waters. Was he inadvertently undermining her autonomy? A tense silence lingered, thick with unspoken words. Charlie realized that the wrestling match of emotions between them was not just about equality in the workplace. It was about trust, about partnership, and about mutual respect. "I'm trying to support you, Sarah," he finally said, his voice softer. "But I see now that I can't just charge in without considering how you feel about it. This isn't my fight alone." Gradually, her shoulders relaxed, though uncertainty still clouded her expression. "You don't have to lead the charge. Sometimes, just listening is enough." Charlie took a deep breath, feeling the tension begin to ebb. He couldn't deny the power of her words. He had to recalibrate his approach, not as a shield but as an ally beside her, ready to elevate her narrative rather than overshadow it with his intervention. As they finished breakfast, the atmosphere felt lighter, yet unresolved. He needed to address the implications of his message and prepare for the backlash that may come. Charlie picked up his phone, turning it in his hands. The notifications beeped alertly, an avalanche of responses to his declaration flooding in. What had he brought upon them? He could already foresee the questions from the board, the private messages from colleagues split between support or disapproval. The time had come for him to wrestle with potential consequences, both professionally and personally. "Charlie," Sarah said suddenly, her tone serious, "what comes next?" He looked up, meeting her gaze with determination. "Now, I need to face my team and our partners. I need to explain my decision and reinforce that this isn't a detraction from our goals, it's a collective advancement." The path ahead was going to be fraught with challenges, but in those moments, he understood the fight wasn't just about equality, it was about their relationship evolving, about stepping out of individual silos into a partnership that could weather the storm together. As he left for work, a powerful realization struck Charlie. He wasn't just defending a woman, he was investing in their future. But as the elevator doors closed, another thought crept in: how would his colleagues react? The time had come to face not just the industry, but the inner workings of his own company, and that was no small task. The looming challenges were palpable. This wasn't just about him anymore, it was about the ideals they fought for and whether they could withstand the backlash together. Would they rise stronger, or would the pressures fracture their unity? The office loomed ahead like a fortress, its steel and glass facade reflecting the anxiety swirling within Charlie. Each step toward the entrance felt heavier than the last. The weight of impending discussions pressed down, accompanied by the low hum of uncertain conversations that drifted from within. He took a moment at the entrance, inhaling sharply, rehearsing what he would say to his team. The moment he stepped inside, a halo of curiosity enveloped him. Whispers surged through the corridors, mixing with cautious glances exchanged between colleagues. Charlie felt the scrutiny, an invisible force swirling around him, colliding with his resolve. It was time to confront the reality of his actions. He maneuvered through the maze of cubicles to find his team gathered in the conference room, a diverse array of faces etched with concern, confusion, and a hint of admiration. As he entered, their murmurs stilled, a palpable tension in the air. Charlie, one of the senior managers, Mark, spoke first, his tone flat yet demanding. "What were you thinking sending that message?" Charlie took a deep breath, feeling the heat rise in his chest. This was not just about defending Sarah, it was about standing in his truth, nourishing the very foundation of their workplace. "I was thinking we cannot afford to ignore the realities of inequality any longer," he began, addressing the room. "I was compelled to support Sarah because her merit should be recognized, and I'd rather risk my position than support a system that perpetuates injustice." Mark scoffed, challenging Charlie's idealism. "But you're risking everything. What if this backfires? What will our partners think? What about the company's reputation?" The room shifted uncomfortably. This was not just a singular concern, it reflected the fears that each individual harbored. Would their commitment to ethical principles ultimately endanger the firm's financial stability? Charlie clenched his fists, centering himself. "I understand the risk, but ask yourselves, is this the kind of environment we want? One that sacrifices integrity for the sake of comfort. Just then, Sarah entered, and the atmosphere shifted again. Her presence brought a quiet strength that seemed to reinforce Charlie's commitment. As their eyes met, he saw encouragement mixed with a flicker of apprehension. He had put her in a difficult position, yet here she was, standing beside him. "Listen," she interjected, her voice steady. "This isn't just about a message or what Charlie did. It's about the real work we need to do every day to ensure everyone has a seat at this table. We've got to fight together, create a culture where merit alone shines through without gender biases affecting our judgment." The managers exchanged glances, contemplative. For a moment, Charlie sensed the tide shifting in their favor, but doubt still lingered like a specter in the air. Tension coiled tightly, and he wondered if they could take a leap into the unknown together. Charlie, Sarah, another colleague, Lisa, spoke up, her voice shaky but resolute. "I commend your courage. But what are we going to do about it? How do we transform this intention into action?" Charlie seized the opportunity. "We create a task force committed to examining the equality in our hiring and promotion processes," he proposed. "We set tangible goals. We encourage dialogues, workshops, and training programs aimed at dismantling inequities." The silence felt like a fragile bridge stretching between ideals and the practicalities of change. Some faces brightened at the prospects of action. Others remained apprehensive, questioning the feasibility. "Are you ready for the repercussions?" Mark questioned again, his earlier skepticism creeping back into his tone. "It's going to take more than a heartfelt message to change a corporate culture." Charlie felt the familiar knot tighten in his stomach, but this time it was paired with a resolute determination. "I'd rather take those repercussions knowing we're making steps toward a just workplace than remain mute in a broken system. It's not just about principles, it's about our legacy as a company." As he surveyed the room, energies gradually shifted. The air filled with muttered affirmations and hesitant nods of agreement. They were not yet united, but a collective impulse had sparked one that could potentially nurture a renewed identity for them as a team, yet as discussions unfolded, shadowed doubts lingered. Would his colleagues truly be ready to support these changes, or were they simply placating his impulsiveness now? In this moment of small victories and hopeful dialogues, the question loomed: were they prepared for the challenges that lay ahead, or would fear revert them back into silence? Charlie left the conference room with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. He had ignited a conversation, but at what cost? Would their elusive unity hold strong under the weight of scrutiny, or would the fractures reveal themselves when the stakes rose? And as the day progressed, a new, ominous email popped into his inbox, an official letter from the board, hinting at an emergency meeting for the following day. The implications of his stand were far from resolved. The next morning arrived, gray and overcast, reflecting the looming anxiety Charlie felt as he sat at his desk. The official letter from the board lay heavy in his mind, the vague threat it posed gnawing at his determination. He stared at the blank screen before him, fingers hovering above the keyboard. He knew he should be drafting a message to the team, perhaps calming the waters, but instead, he felt paralyzed by a tangle of thoughts. What if he misread the situation? What if his impulsiveness would not only cost him his position but damage Sarah and the fragile initiative they had just birthed together? Alternatively, what if this was the catalyst for real change, a shift that could redefine the very fabric of their company? The stakes had never felt higher. "Morning, Charlie," a familiar voice broke his reverie. It was Lisa, her eyes betraying a mix of concern and expectation. "Are you okay? About the meeting?" "Not sure yet," he replied, forcing a half smile. "I suppose I'm waiting to see what the board wants to discuss." She pulled up a chair beside him. "You know, your message actually sparked conversations across departments. I overheard people discussing how to make the workplace more equitable during lunch." There was enthusiasm in her tone, but it came laced with the uncertainty of potential backlash. Charlie leaned in closer, a flicker of hope igniting within. "You really think people are willing to engage with this?" "Definitely," Lisa replied. "But there's a lot of fear too. It's a tough industry, and everyone is scared of the repercussions. His throat tightened at her words. He thought about his own fear, his own uncertainties, and how they twisted into a resolve that he could not fully articulate. He had thrust himself into this, and now he needed to hold that fragile support together. The minutes ticked by until the impending meeting with the board drew near. He gathered his notes, detailing the suggestions for the task force and the steps for future workshops. As he looked through the door, he caught Sarah's gaze again. She was seated with a small group of empathetic colleagues, who seemed just as anxious for the proceedings as he was. Their solidarity fortified his conviction perhaps they could genuinely shift the culture together. As he walked into the boardroom, a wave of tension hit him. The atmosphere felt constricted, as though words hung like weights, precursors to a storm. The board members, hunched over a sleek table, regarded him with a mix of scrutiny and anticipation. Mark's presence loomed large, and Charlie steeled himself for the confrontation. "Charlie," the CEO began, expression unreadable. "Your email raised alarms. I trust you realize what kind of implications this could have." "Yes," Charlie said, meeting his gaze squarely. "But I also believe that silence in the face of inequality carries its own risks, and we can't ignore that anymore." A murmur of dissent arose as he articulated his vision. Attempts to redirect the conversation into corporate technicalities fell flat when faced with the urgency of moral integrity they had collectively stifled for too long. Uncertainty brewed among some members, their hesitance crystallizing the fear that Charlie's stance might pull them further into uncharted waters. Suddenly, a board member, Evelyn, spoke up. "You seem heavily invested in this, Charlie. Is this truly about the company's values, or are you motivated by something more personal?" A bead of sweat trickled down his spine. He knew that he was at the precipice of exposing more than he had ever intended. The words were poised on the edge of his lips, begging to be released about the fear of letting Sarah, and indeed himself, down. The question was profoundly personal, it threatened to unravel his conviction. "It's personal, yes," he finally admitted, his voice steady and unyielding. "Our work environment affects us all, but I cannot support a system that compromises integrity for the sake of profitability." Gasps echoed softly around the table, a fracture in the facade. Charlie's heart raced as he sensed the momentum. Change, he remained conscious of the growing awareness among them. Perhaps this was the breakthrough they all needed to confront their own discomfort. As the board murmured their concerns, questions flared and debates ignited. Charlie felt himself shift from a point of vulnerability into a position of unexpected influence. He had ignited a dialogue. The stakes were high, but with every exchange, he discovered a deeper conviction rising within him. Would the board dismiss him, or would they rise to the challenge that their corporate identity desperately needed? The surrounding silence hung thick, the tension poised on a knife's edge. The moment was ripe, fraught with unspoken challenges. Would this be a path to lasting change, or simply a temporary disruption? The tension in the boardroom simmered to a palpable heat, and Charlie struggled to maintain his composure as the arguments clashed around him. His heart raced, fueled by adrenaline and dread simultaneously. A single glance at the members of the board revealed a range of reactions: apprehensive frowns, raised eyebrows of disbelief, and a scattering of interested glances. He noticed Evelyn leaning forward, her posture signaling an openness he hadn't expected. "Charlie, I see your point, but we need to consider the consequences of such an open declaration," Mark interjected, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Our competitors are cutthroat, and being perceived as weak can be disastrous." Charlie's lips pressed tightly together, a surge of defiance pooling within. Perceived weakness? Or is it the refusal to face facts? We are not weak for wanting a fairer workplace. We breathe life into those values, or we sacrifice our integrity. Is that how we want to be remembered? His hand gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white, as he fought the urge to raise his voice further. Little did they know how deeply the stakes ran for him. It was not just a professional issue but personal. The thought of living in a culture that stifled honesty and equality sent shivers down his spine. Evelyn's voice broke through, steady and focused. "Charlie, what exactly do you propose?" How do we initiate this dialogue you're advocating for? He felt a surge of hope. Maybe they were ready to engage. We need a task force, one that represents different departments and perspectives, he exhaled, recalling his notes. We can hold workshops, solicit input in real time, set measurable goals, and, above all, implement changes that are driven by our shared experiences rather than corporate jargon. The murmur transformed into a curious discussion, excitement sparking between members. Charlie began to feel the weight lift from his shoulders, a warmth spreading through him. Slowly, the board was beginning to see the potential cradled within vulnerability. Their collective fear turned into a source of strength, but just as he thought he was making progress, Mark interjected again, his voice edged with calculated authority. You understand that any initiative must align with our profit margins, right? If we lose sight of the financial perspective, we're done for. Suddenly, Charlie's resolve vacillated. His thoughts raced back to Sarah, her unyielding spirit and relentless fight for equality in her role. What would she say? How could he justify potentially putting her project at risk for this moment? But the fight had always been for something much grander than this company's bottom line. I understand, Charlie said, each word deliberate. That's why we must strike a balance. An equitable culture isn't just ethical, it fuels engagement and productivity. When our employees thrive, so does the bottom line. We can look at case studies that illustrate successful integration of equity in company culture leading to increased profitability. It must be approached thoughtfully, but it must also be bold. The board sat in silence, evaluating his challenge. He recognized the pulse of their doubt shifting, subtly transforming into consideration. Perhaps they were beginning to see past fear. He could almost hear their thoughts. Is it worth exploring? As the questions arose, he felt a flicker of longing for clarity. He needed to cement this momentum, especially for Sarah's sake, but what sacrifices would it entail? Keeping the board invested without compromising their values seemed like walking a razor's edge. Mark's gaze locked onto Charlie's, a challenge igniting between them. What's the backup plan if this fails? If the initiative does not yield the results we expect? The words hung in the air, and Charlie felt the enormity of the moment pressing down on him. I will not back down from the truth, he declared, his voice steady. I believe we are poised for greatness, but this requires us to acknowledge our flaws and to innovate from them. If it fails, I will take responsibility. But I won't stand by and let fear dictate our future. The board members exchanged more weighed looks. Could they rise to Charlie's challenge? A sudden knock on the door broke his concentration. His heart sank with an underlying dread as Lisa entered, her face pale. Charlie, there's something you need to know. It's about Sarah. With that, the ground beneath him felt unstable, fear leaping back into his chest. What could the implications be? Would her situation unravel everything he'd just built? The previous conversations, the tension, and the courage seemed to tilt into uncertainty. It was apparent his next move would determine not just his future, but the very essence of the values he had fought to instill. Would he stand tall in this turbulent moment, or would it push him over the edge? Lisa stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. They've put her on the hot seat, Charlie. The press is breathing down her neck about those new policies and discontent is brewing within her team. Charlie's mind raced. Sarah had always been the backbone of the office culture they aimed to reshape. Suddenly, the weight of his ambitions felt like an anchor dragging him underwater. He had fought for a vision that could uplift them all, yet now he stood at the precipice of losing everything that mattered. Details. I need every detail, he urged, urgency cutting through his despair. He was more than a leader, he was her partner, and he couldn't let her face the fallout alone. The interview was tough. They questioned her commitment, her authority, Lisa continued, peering at the table, avoiding eye contact. She wasn't prepared for the backlash, and it's only getting worse. Each word struck Charlie like a blow. He had pushed his agenda forward, but now he felt the repercussions radiate like shockwaves consuming everything in their path. The very environment he aspired to create was now fracturing under scrutiny, and it sent his thoughts spiraling back. Had he become the very thing he loathed? Does she know I'm with her? He asked, though deep down, he feared the answer. He hadn't wanted to burden her with his battles, yet it could hardly matter now. Lisa nodded, her eyes glistening with concern. But with all this, she might feel isolated, like everyone else against her. They're casting doubt, Charlie. You know how brutal the media can be. His heart pounded as he considered the board meeting just moments ago. The momentum he had felt was now overshadowed by fear of failure, of not being able to support Sarah adequately. How could he adequately shield her from this when every fiber of his being felt so exposed? Get me in contact with her team now. I need to clarify our stance and support her, Charlie commanded, feeling a new wave of determination course through him. This battle was bigger than their personal ambitions, it revolved around trust, respect, and integrity within their workplace. He had to be the advocate she needed, showing the board that their values were at stake. As Lisa hurried to make the call, Charlie's thoughts turned inward. He was no longer simply a part of the boardroom rhetoric, he needed to mobilize a force behind Sarah. This wasn't about just fulfilling a vision, it was about the people, their dreams and aspirations. The murmurs of the boardroom echoed in his mind. Mark's challenges had pushed him further than he had anticipated. That exchange had ignited a fire within him. Suddenly, he realized he couldn't simply propose ideas around a table, he needed to champion change through action, to fight for not just Sarah but for every unvoiced concern in that room. The previously nebulous task force idea crystallized into something clearer. This initiative needed to be more than a discussion. It required genuine commitment that transcended hollow promises on the floor, in the trenches with every employee. Charlie felt adrenaline surge again, igniting a resolve he hadn't anticipated, but doubt still rattled around in his chest. How could he lead in this initiative when they were already on the brink of collapse? And what of Sarah? Could he extend this ambition to the extent that it risked both their careers in the process? As Lisa wrapped up her call, Charlie's jaw clenched at the thought of the powerful adversaries they faced both within and outside. He had a plan forming in his mind, speaking to everyone gathered around that table. But the stakes would be higher. It would require sacrifices and an unflinching truth to reshape what lay ahead. Let us prepare a statement. I'll back her up, no matter what the critics say. If we're going down fighting, Charlie said resolutely as he prepared himself. The moment of truth had come, and he knew it would come at a cost. However, a chilling thought flickered through his mind. Was his courage enough to confront what was about to unfold, or would it shatter everything he had desperately fought to protect? As he stood at this crossroad, he understood that the next steps would not only define Sarah's career but also reshape his own legacy. In an atmosphere charged with uncertainty, would he step forward boldly into the fray, or would he falter as shadows of doubt loomed ever larger? Charlie felt as though a storm was brewing inside him, wild and chaotic, reflecting the tumultuous environment around the office. The air crackled with tension, filled with unspoken fears and doubts. As Lisa finished her call, he grabbed a legal pad and a pen, determined to outline his strategy. If they were to overcome this challenge, he had to act quickly and decisively. What's our timeline for responding to the media? Charlie asked, glancing at Lisa, who was still reeling from their earlier conversation. She looked up, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and determination. We need to put something together by the end of the day, she replied. But we also need a long-term plan. This isn't just a one-off response. Charlie nodded, realizing that this was about more than just a statement. They needed to rebuild Sarah's credibility before the media's narrative set in stone. The thought of the online trolls and scoffers eagerly waiting for the next scandal sent a chill racing down his spine. He carefully considered how to transform this crisis into an opportunity for change, both for Sarah and for their organization. In that moment, Charlie was jolted by a sudden realization: if they were going to fight, he couldn't just protect Sarah from the storm, he had to take an active role in shaping the narrative. Let us create a town hall meeting, he suggested, tapping the pad with the pen, to address employee concerns directly. I'll speak to the board about bringing everyone into the discussion. They need to see that we're united. Lisa's eyes brightened at the idea. If we can communicate directly with the employees and show that we care, it might assuage some concerns. They need to see that she's not alone in this. The thought sparked something deep within Charlie. He recognized that this crisis could potentially ignite a culture of transparency, a culture where team members felt they could speak freely and contribute ideas to shape their own environment. They could create an open dialogue, allowing the employees' voices to be heard rather than swept away by fears of dissent. Exactly. And I need to give Sarah a platform for her voice, he emphasized, feeling the weight of responsibility shift from his shoulders to his resolve. We'll put together an FAQ document from employee questions and comments to anticipate potential backlash. I want her to address their concerns directly, to remind them of why she believes in these policies. Energy surged through Charlie as he mentally sketched out the layout of the meeting. He envisioned it as a space of vulnerability and strength, a real showcase of what it meant to be a team. They would not only defend Sarah but publicly affirm their collective values. They had to illustrate that the organization wouldn't cower under pressure. What if there are critics in the crowd? Lisa interjected, shaking her head slightly. You know, not everyone will be supportive. There will always be critics, he said, holding her gaze, but this is also our chance to cultivate allies. If we present a united front, with openness and honesty, we can turn the tide. Every difficult question is an opportunity to build trust. A sense of calm coiled around Charlie, fighting against the churning uncertainty inside. This was not just a personal battle, it was a movement towards fostering a more inclusive and resilient company culture. Yet, doubt still whispered its chilling thoughts. What if they didn't believe him? What if Sarah faltered under the weight of scrutiny? Time slipped away, and Charlie's thoughts rattled stubbornly against their own steel walls. Let us begin drafting the statement now, outlining our support for Sarah. I'll gather the team to discuss the town hall, he said, feeling a new sense of urgency. This isn't merely about surviving the storm, it's about redefining our identity during it. As Lisa nodded in agreement, Charlie felt the true weight of his mission crystallizing with a sharper focus. There were no guarantees, and doubt taunted him like a specter, but he had to push through. Would his steadfast commitment be sufficient to usher in the change they so desperately needed? As he took a deep breath, burying the uncertainty, he prepared to step into the electric meeting ahead. The defining moment was upon him, and he had no choice but to face it head-on. But as he printed the draft statement, a chilling realization gripped him. The true test of his leadership was not merely in championship for Sarah, but in the accountability that lay just beyond the horizon. Could he navigate the storm raging inside while forging a path forward for them both? Charlie sensed the weight of his decisions as he gathered the team for the imminent town hall meeting. He could feel the urgency buzzing through the conference room, an electric charge that crackled with a mix of anticipation and dread. He placed his notes on the table, yet their rigid lines felt like a barrier against the spontaneity required for a true dialogue. Would they embrace this opportunity for change, or would the shadows lurking in the corners of the room transform it into just another corporate facade? His colleagues filed in, their faces reflecting a spectrum of emotions: curiosity, concern, confusion. Charlie straightened his back, forcing himself to project an air of confidence. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, he began, his heart thudding in his chest. We're facing an unprecedented challenge as a company, but I believe this is an opportunity to strengthen our foundation and reaffirm our commitment to transparency. He watched as a few eyebrows shot up, skepticism mingling with hope. Buried in their apprehension lay the buried truths about their fears and aspirations. This was not just about saving Sarah, but about nurturing a culture where vulnerability was met with resilience. Today, we will openly discuss what has happened and how we can support Sarah moving forward, he continued, noting the tense silence that enveloped the room. This isn't just a message of defense, it's a chance to redefine who we are. Lisa stood next to him, a calm presence amidst the brewing storm. She glanced at Charlie, silently urging him on. He took a steadying breath and pressed on. We need to be able to communicate clearly and authentically, both internally and with the media. Our approach must be open and inclusive. As he outlined the agenda, Charlie began to feel the storm inside him calm, replaced by a burgeoning sense of purpose. He couldn't ignore that deep-seated notion: he was on the precipice of transformation not just for himself, but for the entire organization. Let us start by addressing any questions or concerns you might have, he said, inviting them into the conversation. Silence filled the room again for a moment before murmurs began to rise. It was as if a dam had broken, allowing fear and doubt to seep through in waves of inquiry. One by one, they voiced their thoughts, each question pulling Charlie deeper into the depths of accountability. What if Sarah doesn't recover from this? One voice asked, revealing a vulnerability that tightened the air. What if this scandal becomes part of our identity? Another chimed in, exposing the heart of their collective fear. Charlie felt the weight of their uncertainty. It was a haunting reminder that genuine leadership demanded facing the darkness that he had previously tried to outrun. He stepped closer to the group, his voice steadying. We have a choice. We can either hide behind the shadows or step into the light with honesty. This is a moment for each of you to voice your concerns because you matter. As the dialogue unfolded, Charlie began to uncover more than skepticism. He discovered an underlying strength flickering within his team. Their questions were not merely rooted in fear, they were expressions of hope for a better future, intertwined with a desire for authenticity. In that shared vulnerability, each participant found their voice, some sharing heartfelt stories of personal experiences, times they felt marginalized, ignored, and disrespected, and all sought reassurance that they would not be left in the lurch. Charlie realized that their fears mirrored his own, a reflection on the uncomfortable but necessary path they all walked together. Just as the atmosphere began to lift, a soft but steady voice echoed from the back, challenged by a more cynical perspective. But what if all this effort is for nothing? What if people simply don't care? Those words pierced through the hopeful atmosphere, grounding Charlie once again in the stark reality of the situation. He felt the blood rush from his face, uncertainty seeping in like a cold breeze. However, it was a moment for clarity. As a leader, he had to confront this doubt head-on. But could he sway the opinions of those who already deemed failure inevitable? This is the moment we either rise or fall together, he replied, steel in his tone. I can't promise that everything will turn around overnight, but I know we have the strength to help each other navigate this storm. Together. As the meeting adjourned, Charlie felt a rush of mixed triumph and trepidation. He was no longer merely addressing a crisis, he was at the helm of a movement. But could he maintain this momentum while holding himself accountable for the promises made? The question lingered like an uninvited guest in the room. While Charlie dismissed the team, his resolve hardened. With Sarah's credibility at stake, he needed to fully embody what he preached. The next steps loomed ahead, daunting yet exhilarating. The upcoming media response would be critical, but the ultimate test would be how he lived up to the ideals he had just proclaimed. Could he face the media with the same unshakable integrity he sought to cultivate within his team? As the dawn of Media Day approached, Charlie Thompson fortified his resolve, preparing not just for a statement but for a definitive climax in his journey of self-discovery. The echoes of yesterday's town hall still resonated, a chorus of fears and hopes woven together within their walls. He understood now that his mission extended beyond merely defending Sarah. It had matured into a commitment to galvanize their workplace around genuine equity and open dialogue. Every difficult question is an opportunity to build trust, he had told his team. Now he stood at a precipice where courage would blend with accountability. It was undeniably personal, there was no turning back. Instead of anxiety, he felt a clear sense of purpose unfurling within him like a flag in the wind. He was a leader, and for the first time, he fully embraced that identity. The press conference hall buzzed with anticipation, cameras poised to capture every nuance of the unfolding drama. Charlie took a deep breath as he stepped up to the podium. He caught glimpses of Sarah in the audience, her expression a mix of admiration and vulnerability, which struck him to his core. He had to protect her, not just as a CEO but as a partner aware of the responsibilities that lay ahead. Thank you for being here today, he began, scanning the faces of reporters and industry voices that had once seemed so intimidating. We are not here today to hide behind corporate jargon or appease critics. We are here to acknowledge the events that have transpired and to chart a path forward, one grounded in integrity and equality. The response was immediate. Questions erupted, pushing him to stand firm under a sharp lens, but for the first time, he felt impregnable. The recent scrutiny surrounding Sarah has opened up crucial conversations about equity within our industry, he continued, each word deliberately punctuated by the weight of accountability he felt. It is imperative that we address biases head-on and commit to fostering a culture that values merit, action, and integrity. As the questions flowed, Charlie found himself addressing not just the media but also the industry's larger narrative. He articulated the necessity for transparency, for creating an environment where both men and women thrived equally. Each answer was laced with vulnerability and sophistication, navigating their story while defending Sarah's merit and resilience. This is not just a response to criticism, it's a commitment to making real changes, he declared, piercing through the tension in the room with unwavering conviction. He spoke passionately about the plans to implement changes within their hiring and promotional practices, showcasing a progressive roadmap that resonated with the core values he had awakened in himself and his team. When the session drew to a close, Charlie stepped away from the podium with a sense of accomplishment he had never felt before. There wouldn't just be collateral damage here was the beginning of a shift. With every question addressed, he had dismantled the lurking shadows of doubt threatening their narrative. In the wake of the press conference, the reactions came flooding in. Media headlines shifted from derogatory to inquisitive as industry leaders praised Charlie's candidness and commitment to challenging inequities. Colleagues began discussing proactive changes within their own departments, energized by a newfound sense of empowerment. As the dust settled, Charlie and Sarah found themselves linked not only by their personal relationship but also by their professional evolution. He marveled at how far they had come since that devastating interview, how it had triggered a catalyst within him, transforming vulnerability into action. They sat together, recounting the day's events and imagining a future rife with possibility. Charlie could see the foundation of their marriage fortified by mutual respect, each proud of the other's accomplishments. "You stood by me today," Sarah said softly, her voice brimming with assurance. "You didn't overshadow me, you elevated me." In that moment, Charlie understood the depths of personal transformation. He could conquer the perceived limitations imposed upon them, step boldly into the light, and together, they cultivated a partnership that not only dismantled barriers but also allowed them both to thrive as individuals. Charlie leaned forward, his heart buoyed, knowing that they had not merely weathered a storm but had begun to redefine their identity together. Their commitment to equality and transparency would build a legacy that transcended their individual achievements and resolved a shared mission, deeply rooted in the principles of merit and integrity. Amidst the chaos of change, he had not only proven his leadership but had also rooted it in authenticity. The American dream felt tangible once more, a symphony crafted through their shared battles. And with it, an unmistakable pride filled him. He had achieved a fulfillment that was not founded in ambition, but in unwavering support for the woman he loved. Now, it was the moment of commitment to the audience that had journeyed with them. If you believe in standing up for integrity, subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. We need your support. Comment your reactions and theories about this transformation, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to show the power of personal growth and allyship.